I often say what's best for business is not necessarily what's best for you, and vice versa. What's best for you is not necessarily what's best for business. Podcast Growth Nation, welcome back to another episode of Podcast Growth University, where we talk all things podcasting all the time. Today, for episode number 154, what do you prioritize, the algorithm or you? One of our clients just crossed 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and they're getting a bunch of comments because they have certain videos that get hundreds of thousands of views. There's a lot of comments, 1,000 comments, 2,000 comments. It's wild. And we were having a conversation recently, and they said, what do you think? Should we get back to all of these comments? They said one of the people we talked to said it doesn't really matter because it doesn't help the algorithm. And I said, while it might not be a win for the algorithm, there are way more benefits than just the algorithm. If you're trying to build a community, if you're trying to get your audience to self-identify, if you want to build trust, it might not be what's best for the algorithm, but it might be what's best for long-term success. And that's really what I wanted to talk about today, because I had another client who I helped him with scripts for his videos. And again, we've talked about this many times, hook, story, lesson, future pace, call to action, that type of thing. And he messaged me the other day and said, hey, I don't know if I want to do this. It just doesn't feel right. I don't feel super authentic. I don't know if I want to do the podcast this way. I said, totally fine. Let's figure out a way that is more sustainable and more aligned and feels more natural to you. Just because it's what's best for the algorithm, just because it's what's best for the platform, just because it's what's best for vanity metrics potentially, does not mean it is what's best for you. The way I title these episodes are not what's best for the algorithm. The way we do Next Level University is not what's best for the algorithm, but it is what's best for us. And it's taken 8 years and over 2,000 episodes of testing things to figure out how we want to do it. But if I could give anything to you to save you hopefully time and hopefully pain and maybe misalignment, you have to figure out, what does winning actually mean to you? So I could give you a really good idea of how to win on YouTube. And you might say, well, that's not aligned. No worries. It's not aligned for me either. That's why I'm not willing to do it. But I have clients who do things in a certain way that I might not do. It's not bad. It's not toxic. It's not any of that, but it's just something that I'm not willing to do. So I'll just grind for a little bit longer or a lot longer and go through maybe more of the hard yards. But that's okay, because I want to do what's right for me. So why does this happen? Why does this happen to us? Well, one, I think we have to trade ourselves in to win. We have to trade ourselves and maybe our morals and our values. And again, I'm not saying you're doing anything inherently negative or terrible. I'm just saying copying somebody else's video and copying somebody else's thumbnail on YouTube is essentially going to get you extra views. And not everybody is willing to do that. I'm not. I don't want to do that. That's not the way I want to do it. But I think a lot of us, we have convinced ourselves that we must do that. Another thing that I think pushes this is, if you don't think you're going to be able to be successful, of course you're going to think to yourself, well, what are some of the shortcuts that I can take that might be better for the algorithm but not great for me? I think that's a very, very common one. The other one is you don't understand the downside of doing what you're doing. So again, what's a good example of this? I know some people who pay for views and pay for reviews and pay for comments and they pay for stuff. Are they going to get ahead faster than you and I? Yes. Are they going to get as good as you and I would get if we had to put in more time to get that result? Absolutely not. It's good for the algorithm. It's not necessarily good for their long-term growth. So a big piece of this is the conversation around, are you thinking purely short-term? Are you thinking long-term? Are you thinking, how good can I get at this, or what can I get out of this? That's a conversation that I think we all need to have with ourselves to figure it out. We want to feel authentic, but we also want to feel successful. And what we're really talking about today is the intersection of those two. What does authenticity feel like to you? And what does success feel like to you? I don't want to feel inauthentic. I would rather be less successful and more authentic than vice versa. To the point where we have had some really big mentors in the past that we have moved on from because it just didn't make us feel very good. It was the best for the algorithm. It was the absolute freaking best. It is a business mistake to move on from that type of person. But in terms of character and in terms of alignment and authenticity and self-esteem and self-worth, that was the right choice. I'm not telling you you have to make the same choice. That is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is we have to figure out, what does success actually mean? Is success to you looking successful but not actually being successful? That's a different conversation. Is success to you getting a little better every time you do it and having the opportunity to impact one new person a week? Okay, that's different. Success is also defined by how we get there. That's a really important piece of this because, right? Let's say you do something that is just for the algorithm and it's not great for you. In order to maintain that level of success, you kind of have to keep doing that, unfortunately. And if it's not sustainable and it doesn't feel authentic, that's not going to work. So I think what would be beneficial for all of us, because this is something I didn't do in the beginning. I always had a pretty good grasp of this, but I never sat down and did it. What is success for you? Not just from a result standpoint. When I get X amount of views, X amount of listens, X amount of subs, X amount of dollars, cool, that's results-based. But from a process-based standpoint, what does success look like? To me, it was always no ads, no sponsorships, no affiliates. I'm not interested. I don't want to have somebody else's hand in our cookie jar. Don't want to do it. That is something that we decided pretty early on. But that also makes life harder in many ways. That would be better for the algorithm, quote unquote. Don't want to do it. We stopped having guests after a very, very challenging conversation. We had 2 people. One person who is doing the rounds on the big giant shows, Tom Bilyeu, just massive shows. We did an interview with them, and they were just completely different on the interview versus off behind the scenes. And honestly, they were just arrogant and cocky and toxic. We never released that interview. That is an algorithmic mistake for sure. The last time we ever planned on doing an interview, we had the guest lined up. They said yes, it was on the schedule. It was confirmed. It was that day. And I remember doing extra research on this guest. And I remember seeing a post. And the post was I just couldn't get on board with what they were saying. And I texted Alan or called Alan and said, dude, I can't do this. And he said, man, I have the same feeling. We had a deep conversation and we said, are we just going to stop having guests? Because I don't want to have to go through the process of going through all of their content and seeing what kind of BS they might be pushing. I think it would just be better for us if we didn't do it. Okay, cool, let's do that. And let's also know that that is going to be bad for business, quote unquote. It actually ended up being really good for business long term, but in the short run, it kind of sucked. And now you're starting to see, like, there are some weird things about podcast guesting, sponsorships, that type of stuff. Like, there's a lot of stuff coming out of, if you have a guest on who is just wildly spreading misinformation, who's responsible? Is it the guest's fault or is it the host's fault for not doing the proper research? And there's a lot of big YouTube channels who are getting shredded for who they are being sponsored by when the sponsor comes out and it's found out that they're not legit. Okay, that's potentially dangerous. So there's a lot to get in order here. But I think the simplest thing is sit down and write out from a results-based standpoint, what does success mean to you? And then from a process standpoint, what does success mean to you?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Hurwitz. So last year, I wanted to quit everything. I wanted to throw in the towel. I wanted to hang up my microphone. And Kevin said no. Kevin said, keep going, Jen. You've got this. And oh my God, I'm going to cry. And I did. Coaches need coaches, y'all. And working with Kevin has been one of the best experiences of my life. Oh my God, I'm crying. Kevin, you are the best. I could not do this without you. And thank you. Thank you for being you and the amazing human that you are.
A lot shifted for us when we got to a place where the process level measures of success were happening, and we realized it wasn't good for our character. Surrounding ourselves with certain people that we didn't want to surround ourselves with, feeling like we had to do that. When we let go of that, we felt way better, but it didn't necessarily help business. And that's really what I'm trying to wrap this up with a bow today, is what's best for you is not necessarily what's best for business. If you're doing an episode every other week, it would be better for you to do it weekly. Sorry, let me rephrase that, because even that's incorrect. It would be better for business to do it weekly. Might not necessarily be better for you. Just like on the opposite front, you might think, oh, if I could do an episode every day like you guys, that would be what's best for business. I don't think so. I think that's what's best for us because it forces me to grow and evolve and become something I'm not yet. I get to practice speaking every day. I get to practice answering questions. Awesome. Is that what's best for business? I don't think so. You have to be hyper into personal development if you're going to listen to a personal development podcast every day. Should I do more episodes of this? I don't know. I'm kicking the tires on that. When do I go to 2 episodes a week? Do I ever go to 2 episodes a week? I don't know. I want to make sure it's what's right for the audience. It's what's right for me. It's what's right for business. Short term, long term, I want to make sure it's what's right. So this is a conversation that I think is ever evolving, but you have to sit down and have that conversation in the first place. So that would be kind of my action item takeaway for today's episode based on what we talked about. Sit down and write out a list. I want to have 1 million listens. I want to make $100,000. I want to interview this person. I want to be interviewed on X amount of shows. Boom, 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 boom. Cool. Awesome. Those are results. What are you willing to do in the process? Do you want to get a sponsorship? Awesome. Let's get crystal clear on that. Do you never, ever want to do sponsorships? Cool. Let's get clear on that. Is that going to be what's best for business? I don't know. It depends. It depends on what best for business means to you versus what it means to me. I really want everything we're doing to grow into like a really big business where we have a lot of people on the mission and there's a lot going on. That's what I want. Not everybody wants that. Some people would just like to make enough money to leave their job and be able to podcast full time. And they've gotten to the point where they say, okay, right now I make $60,000 at my job. Somehow I have to replace my income and make $60,000 a year. Did I say a month? $60,000 a year with my podcast. Okay, I have to make $5,000 a month. How could I do that? Well, I could get 1,000 people to pay $5 a month. I could do that. That would be 5,000. Okay. I could get a sponsor who pays me based on how many listens I get. Okay, cool. And the outcome is going to be a little bit different. If I've noticed anything from working with so many podcasters, hundreds and hundreds at this point, the thing that gets thrown off the most is when somebody comes and says, yeah, you know what? I thought I wanted to do it this way to get this result, but I actually don't think that process is right for me. I think that is one of the most noble things you can do, and I think it's what's best for you long-term to come to that anyway. We all know someone out there who has done misaligned things for aligned results and probably regrets it. I'm sure we've all done it in some way, shape, or form. Not necessarily with a podcast specifically. Let's avoid that because that's not going to be fulfilling and it's not going to be sustainable. I would much rather you have a lower target for success that's more aligned than a higher target that's misaligned. But that's a you conversation. I can't have that conversation for you, just like you can't have that conversation for me, unfortunately. Full permission to do things the harder way if they feel more aligned. We have chosen to do this in a very challenging way, but it's more aligned for us than doing it in any other way. Did I always think it was going to be that way? No, not necessarily. I thought we were going to interview guests forever. And eventually it got to the place where it didn't make sense. I thought I was going to have guests on here pretty regularly. I don't know if that's ever going to happen. Don't know. Is that what's best for business? I don't know. Are you going to hear that and say, honestly, I'm going to go find a podcast that has guests? Maybe. But what if that's not right for me? It's okay. And I think we all have to have the courage to do that. We have to create content from a place of abundance, not from scarcity. I know it's really hard to do that when you're scarce, but it's not this serious, but I have lost myself in this journey many times trying to be something that I wasn't. And figuring out, okay, who do I actually want to be? And who do I think I'm supposed to be? And who do I think people want me to be? And that's a whole thing. Who do I want to be? Because if I'm not who I want to be and I'm not producing the type of content I want to produce, I'm going to be miserable. And we're going through an evolution right now where we're so used to talking to a specific audience that I'm afraid to talk to a new audience. But I've grown and I've evolved, and Alan has grown and Alan has evolved, and it's been really challenging to figure out, what do we want to talk about? If I could talk about anything today, what would it be? How do we get to that place? Is that what's best for business? Probably not, because we might lose some listeners. Is that what's best for us? Yes. And here's kind of the last thing I'll touch on before we get out of here. I kind of have a belief that what's best for you is what's best for business. Because if it's not what's best for you, it's probably not going to be sustainable long-term anyway. So it doesn't make sense. Yeah, you can get short-term hits and short-term bumps from doing stuff like that, but I don't think it's going to be sustainable. And if it's not sustainable, it's not going to lead to success anyway. So unless you're so good where you have an exit strategy, I'm going to do X amount until I get to X, I don't really think most of us go in with that mindset. So if it's not sustainable, it's not going to lead to success anyway. And I think if I had to choose between what's not sustainable, it's not good for me or it's not good for business, I would say I want to lean into it's good for me. Because if it's good for me, I'll be able to survive this journey longer, and hopefully I'll be able to figure out what's best for business. I think that's an important piece. When you back yourself into a wall and say, look, I'm going to be a character-driven person, and I'm heart-driven, and I want to coach people, and I want to add value to them, and I want to do this, and I want to do this. Yes, there are far less options, but the options, I would say, are probably way more meaningful. And at least that's the journey that I'm on. I'm not saying you have to be on that journey. I'm not saying you have to take the harder road. I'm not saying any of that. But I do believe the harder road oftentimes is the more rewarding road if it's one that you had the opportunity and privilege to choose. So I will end on that. But yes, tangible takeaway. Do some writing about this. Do some journaling. Make a checklist, whatever resonates most with you. But success for me is not just the number of dollars, the number of listens, the number of clients. It is not that. It is making sure that we do it in an aligned way. And alignment means something different for everybody. All right, cool. If you're struggling with this, I will have my link in the show notes for a free 30-minute podcast breakthrough session. I would love to chat. Again, I have been all over the place in terms of trying to figure out who I am and who I'm supposed to be and what we're supposed to do and what we're not supposed to do. So any value I can add, I would love to help you with that. And then we also have the link below in the show notes for our Facebook group, Podcast Growth Nation, a daily inspiration, a daily motivation, maybe a daily lesson for podcasters by podcasters. So if you're looking for a community of other podcasters, I think we're coming up on 100 people. So shout out to everybody who has joined. I appreciate you all so very much. I most likely will get to the place where I'm doing a live in there every week. So we're working towards that. But yeah, would love to have you if you're looking for other podcasters to surround yourself with. And I hope you're feeling like you're authentic. You're feeling like you're able to be yourself. And you don't feel like you're trading in yourself for success. I don't know. I don't know what's worse. Trading yourself for success, never getting success, or getting success and realizing that you didn't want to do it that way. I think that's more of a philosophical question. So I hope you are right with whatever the answer you come up with is. As always, keep on podcasting, keep on crushing it, and I will talk to you all next week.